All right, everyone. I want to welcome you back to week 2 of our course, Technology of Decentralization. And this week is a very exciting week to me. We're going to start talking about the Encyclosphere itself, and we're going to do so with some actual encyclopedists, 5 of them, which is and so I know most of these people personally, and they're all smart. So this should be a very interesting discussion, very interesting indeed. The format that I want to follow here is approximately 25 minutes of introductions. They will introduce themselves and their project. And I think going through this process of getting familiar with the different encyclopedia projects can activate parts of your brain to think about essentially what the issues these different encyclopedias might have and how something like the Encyclosphere could help. And then I'll make a short introduction to the Encyclosphere project myself. I mean, I think probably most, if not everyone watching this knows something about it, but I thought I would try to orient us. And then basically I'm going to ask a series of questions and try to get feedback from our expert encyclopedists here about various issues that concern constructing a decentralized network of encyclopedias, because after all, I want these people to be participants in this network. And right. Why don't we begin with the introductions then? And I propose to go through the list that the names are appeared across the top of my screen here. That's pretty random. So Philip Parker, would you go first, please?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Let me do a screen share for everybody. Just let me know if you can see this. Just give me a thumbs up. Can you guys see this? Are we good? All right, thumbs up. All right, there we go. So I'm a professor at INSEAD, and I teach machine learning and AI for executives and MBAs and the like, and worked on projects with the Grameen Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, et cetera, over the years, delivering content for underserved languages or communities, or even if it's in the English language, there's a lot of content that hasn't been synthesized. So I worked on a project for Proto4U out of University of Wageningen to create plant profiles that Wikipedia articles didn't quite cover in depth. And so with my team about 5 years ago, we had this question. There's this arc of history of encyclopedias, starting with Diderot and the Britannica, et cetera, moving on to the other modern ones that we enjoyed as kids. Then Encarta came out, of course, and then Wikipedia. So we sat down and said, well, what's after Wikipedia? What will be the thing that might actually change the game dramatically? And what we noticed is amongst unserved segments is typically you get this kind of power curve. Very few languages have a lot of articles. Most languages, 90+% have very few articles. And if you imagine the poor person who speaks Kikuyu who types in lump in breast, there's no articles in her language. So she goes to the national language, Swahili. Again, no articles are present. Then has to go to English, in which there's a lot. So my team has been doing this publishing in minority languages, et cetera, for years now, over about 1,000 dialects. And so we pivoted to say, well, we've done agriculture and biodiversity fact sheets via algorithms quite successfully. So why don't we just expand that to all known concepts? Our value chain in the content looks something like this. The world is full of structured and semi-structured data. The Wikipedia value chain, or not just Wikipedia, but anyone doing fact sheets, generally does an editorial or filtering process based on rules of notoriety and acceptable knowledge. And then editors then hand create articles and the like, and then readers are exposed to that. So we reverse the value chain in our project called Botipedia, where we fully automate the cleaning and filtering and sorting and scoring of all sorts of different types of unstructured and semi-structured and fully structured data for that matter. And at the end of the day, the idea is to create billions of Wikipedia articles, like Wikipedia articles, billions and billions of them. We're starting with 109 languages, and then we'll expand to more after that. So first things first, walk before you run. So in terms of pure content play, our objective was to do something like this. Wikipedia, in terms of percent of how big Botipedia will be, is going to be just a small percent of that, because we're not limiting the subject space. In essence, there might be an article on the song Let It Be. Why not have articles on every song? There might be an article on Half Moon Bay in Silicon Valley. Why not have every bay in the world? There is an article on a famous YouTuber. Why not all YouTube channels, et cetera, et cetera. And you end up compiling and getting just billions of articles, but also putting them in local languages. So for a quick demo here, if you look at a typical output of a long tail concept, this is a number I've just typed into Google, and you see that when you hit return, there's no results found. This is the experience of a Kikuyu speaker. When you go to Wikipedia, you'll notice there's no results found either. This is because Wikipedia is upstream in the content space to search engines and other people that allow discoverability. In Botipedia, no matter what number you type in, there's a page that's created. When you scroll down, it tells you about, it starts with number theory, and it diagnoses it using natural language understanding. What is partitions, its Bernoulli number, arithmetic, and then what kind of integer sequences it resolves to, et cetera. Now that's for the template of number. Because it's kind of formulaic in its style, when you click to any language, this is the Amharic version, an Ethiopian language, you can get the same thing. So think of it as people, place, or things, or concepts, right, that articles are written about. This is an article about a colleague of mine at INSEAD named Ziv Carmon, our former Dean of Research and Development. This says, oh, having read what he's published, he has to be likely to be an expert in all of these things. Here's some of his publications. Here's how he ranks vis-a-vis his colleagues that have the same background, let's say. Here's his percentile of citations and things like that. Here's some pictures of him. Here's some external links, some images, things like that. This is the same version of him in Amharic. To get an idea of how broad we can go, because we're not limiting the subject area, I've just typed in the word microbiome here. And we put over here in the info box, we call it, on this side, we put, here's the Wikipedia articles for microbiome right there. There's the original article, and then there's Earth microbiome human. For ours, when I click show, these are all the expressions that Botipedia covers: blood microbiome, cheese microbiome, et cetera. And when you click on it, it's just going to give you it's going to write for you the cheese microbiome thing. Now, what we've done is we've scored, ranked all knowledge, billions, like tens of billions of sentences, phrases, etc., across vetted sources from people within domains. So we contacted zoologists, botanists, biologists, mathematicians, etc., and then said, okay, how do you guys write your own fact sheets if you're an encyclopedist? Then we wrote algorithms that simply mimic that. And because this cheese biome thing is kind of a scientific thing, it talks about the different types of cheese biomes, some images, and it goes on and on, various types of things. So what's going to happen is we're going to be launching this on an invitation-only basis, probably in the month of November. I'll post on LinkedIn, maybe the password and the login and things like that, where people can start playing with it and give us some feedback. We're using responsive design, so it'll be easily adapted to mobile devices and things like that, based on screen resolutions and the like. We found that in third world developing countries, data channels are extremely expensive on mobile devices. So we want to give them the little snippet, like the best little chunk of information we possibly can first. And then if they want more, they give that for free. Because it gets very, very expensive, if you know what I mean, for people to use these huge articles like this. In addition to that, our version of the Encyclosphere is this little button here called Encyclopedia, which is basically nothing more than a broad search across all encyclopedias out there that might exist. And it just kind of maybe can allow people to do those kinds of queries, if you know what I mean, across all the different encyclopedias. It's not close to the Encyclosphere idea, but it's our hack of it. In addition, you can create your own tabs. The one that people kind of think is really interesting is news, or if I create a tab called body art, this allows people to create their own sub-encyclopedia that's specialized in their own subject area. It shows the tab up here. I can move it over and then click it, and it gives me an encyclopedia for body art, and I can look at tattoo styles and different kinds of types of body art, and then et cetera. So that's kind of the scope of what we're doing in general.
It's absolutely amazing, and I'm really looking forward to playing with this when it launches. And I'm very sure actually that Sam is in particular is going to have some things to talk to you about. It's interesting. You and Leslie both have used the same phrase independently in describing your the way that you make articles, and that is plug and chug, or at least some of the articles. And actually, I think Sergei does the same thing. Sam has definitely done the same thing. I think Pat's the only one who hasn't. Anyway, very good. Leslie, about Ballotpedia and yourself.
Thanks. Fun to be here because there are certain challenges and strengths of any encyclopedia project, right? That we would all understand that people who aren't in the community of people who are trying to build information in an encyclopedic way probably wouldn't be that familiar with. That was a pretty exciting presentation, Philip. It did make me think that of all of the people on this call, I'm probably the least technically adept by a long shot. So I hope that I don't trip over my feet. I would like to show you that
she has a PhD in philosophy and she's extremely smart. So
I'll share my screen and we'll look at Ballotpedia. Here we go. So this is the front page of Ballotpedia, which is 15 years old. In 2022, it'll be 15 years old. And the front page these days is more news focused. Overall, we have about 350,000 articles. And the motivating vision for the project is that for many election and candidate related objects of interest, there's just not very much information available about them. If you are trying to find out information about a US Senate candidate or a presidential candidate, if it's one of the top presidential candidates, there's plenty of information you can find on the internet, although you have to wade through a lot. But once you get down to the level of, say, a state treasurer or a state legislative candidate or a state trial court judge, and then even further down, the city council member, et cetera, it does become school board member, it does become quite a bit harder to find information about those objects of interest on the internet. And that's partly because first, many of the down ballot candidates don't themselves have much of an online presence. It's also hard because they come and go a lot. There's a lot of flux in who is a school board member or a city council member or a sheriff of a given county. That changes a lot over the universe of them. There are slightly more than 500,000 local elected officials. So at Ballotpedia, we cover all state legislative candidates, incumbents and candidates every election year on up. So all the federal officials and so forth. And we cover several hundred school boards and several hundred city councils and several hundred counties. But moving further down the ballot and becoming more comprehensive is a really interesting challenge that has a number of aspects to it, which I will not bore you with. But I would say that something that would be really interesting to me, Larry, and for the rest of you, is that One thing that we're pretty good at Ballotpedia is, at least I'm not good at the tech stuff, but I am pretty good at conceptualizing and coming up with a very long list of things that someone might want to know about a given object of knowledge. And when you start thinking about that, like what kind of things would somebody want to know or are available to know about, for example, a school district? It's a really long list. So it's a very, very long list. And a lot of times people don't know that they would be interested in a particular aspect of that object of knowledge because it's never occurred to anybody to put that information together for them. So we're pretty interested in sourcing information and figuring out stuff that people might want to know about it. And although, Larry, I appreciate your shout out that we strive very hard to be neutral. I would say that we do work at that really hard. I would say that our biggest challenge is to strive really hard to think about what facts somebody might wish to know about the object of interest that no one is offering them right now. So what are the facts? How long is the list? What components could be put into an article? And then trying to figure out how we can source that information. And that's it for me.
Very good. Thank you, Leslie. Let's see. So I believe next up is Sergei, if I'm not mistaken.
All right. Okay, so yeah, so my name is Sergei Schekanov. So I'm a physicist. I'm a federal employee. In fact, I'm in Chicago, but I do work actually at CERN, Switzerland. Well, I also a hobbyist who apparently also worries about internet content and in some way monopolistic positions of Google and Wikipedia. I'm a member of Knowledge Standard Foundation. I worked with Larry on several projects, and I joined last year the Knowledge Standard Foundation. So, but before this, I did something which is apparently also can be considered as interesting and useful. I created an encyclopedia called handwiki.org, which is actually currently one of the largest encyclopedias dedicated to science and computing. So I started this project in 2019 from observations that many Wikipedia articles started to vanish following notability restrictions. So I had several actually articles that were vanished just because they were not notable enough. And interestingly enough, they were deleted by somebody who even remotely cannot be qualified as a researcher. Actually, one article was about software program. And actually, I like this article. I started this article 8 years ago. So it described a program which actually was notable. It had many reviews. It had 2 published books dedicated to this program. But even this was not sufficient to keep it. Oh, and I said to myself, oh, gee, what is going on? Why not to use this program to scrub Wikipedia article and restore such deleted articles? So this looked to me like a funny or sarcastic answer to what happened to many Wikipedia articles. So I've created Wikipedia similar to Wikipedia encyclopedia called Handwiki in 2019, using, I think, best data science practices and tools and tricks which we've been using for Large Hadron Collider at CERN. So a few facts about handwiki.org. So this is one of the largest encyclopedia I already mentioned on science and computing. It has about 900,000 articles, almost close to 1 million. Many articles were sourced from different resources, including, of course, Wikipedia, with full attribution to Wikipedia, of course, with all these articles are licensed by Creative Commons license. But unlike Wikipedia, all such articles are organized in categories, so different namespaces. And they are significantly simplified. They are not identical to Wikipedia. They're significantly simplified. They were rebuilt. Handwiki Org has also several innovations, I think, which are very useful for scientists. For example, it has one central database for all references. So you can just maintain this database and you can put references to any article. One can also authorize article, that is, you can put essentially your professional credentials. But I think most importantly, Handwiki preserves Wikipedia articles, which were deleted since 2017. And there are about 60,000 such articles. So as you can imagine, even if I would remove current Wikipedia articles from Handwiki, Handwiki still will be one of the largest encyclopedia on science and technology. Also, more importantly, Handwiki has different Wiki article acceptance policy compared to Wikipedia. It keeps article if there is at least one citation to some a journal article or book or anything. So one reference is sufficient. So this notability restriction is reduced. But however, from other side, there are some requirements for people who want to edit such articles. They need to prove their professional background, scholarly background, or academic background. And actually this makes sense because this is an encyclopedia of science. I usually say this, in many research fields, there are many journals where you can submit your article. And this is, of course, not exactly the case for wiki resources, where we have just Wikipedia with this single article acceptance policy. And then the question is, why not to have several encyclopedias that have different policies, similar to any other journal or journals, which have all different policies to accept articles. So Handwiki in general is trying to solve this problem of monopoly of Wikipedia and encyclopedic information in general. Yeah, thank you. I think that's all from me. Larry, I cannot hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, thank you very much. Sergei has actually, as he mentioned, worked on a few different projects affiliated with the KSF. Both my son and he have worked on two different versions of an encyclopedia meta search engine. Ballotpedia and Citizendium and Everipedia are all searched. Handwiki also actually searched by these meta search engines. One way to conceive of what we're doing then is to basically convert this from a search engine that just queries the search engines of different encyclopedias to one that actually searches its own database of information about encyclopedias. And then we have to solve all the problems that are associated with doing that.
That's right.
Yeah. And Deletionpedia, I think, is another thing that would be great to have. Kind of looking forward to that. Pat Palmer, you're next. I gave Citizendium to Pat, and I've known her for 5 years or so, and I definitely consider her a friend. So, please.
Thank you, Larry. I don't know whether he did me a favor giving me this. Sometimes I think of it as an albatross hanging around my neck. Some of you know that Citizendium was started by Larry around the time, shortly after Wikipedia was founded, and for a few years actually competed with Wikipedia. And the main difference at the time was that in Citizendium, authors used their real names. And posted a real resume on their user page, so you could tell who you were dealing with. Around 2010, the project completely lost to Wikipedia in terms of momentum, but it kept going because there was a dedicated bevy of writers who had already written a lot of content in Citizendium, which they felt was superior to what was in Wikipedia. And it was kept alive through about 2 generations of different leaders. Larry was around and he owned the domain, but he didn't do anything. So different people led it. And then finally it came, you know, these are mostly retired people like me. It almost died off about 1.5 years ago. And right before its death, I happened along and said, no, it can't die, because it would be like burning the best 200 books in the library. So it can't compete in size. It can't compete with Wikipedia in size or exposure. In fact, right now it has almost no exposure, but, and it's a small project compared to most of your efforts, but there's some very good content in there. And in fact, now we've begun to rebrand the project to be a supplement or an alternative to Wikipedia, because there are many articles in Wikipedia, as you all know and have mentioned, that are extremely flawed because they're trolled or controlled by someone, and we don't know who these people are, but they're extremely vigorous in their control of a topic. And many of us who work on Citizendium, there's still a small dedicated core of writers and also a small dedicated core of sponsors who act as advisors to me right now. And so what we have is old technology right now. We're trying to get our software upgraded. Since I came in about 1 year ago, I've had to patch a ship full of sinking holes. Technically, we've had to fight off, there were some haters who, for the last, you know, Wikipedia, Citizendium was like a laboratory of bad behavior. Wikipedia deals with bad behavior by just beating people all to hell and smushing them to a pulp and kicking them out. Well, Citizendium tried to be civil, but we still found that 1 or 2 bad apples can ruin the whole barrel. So finally, we tightened down the screws and we only put up with civil collaborators these days. And we still firmly believe that people should write using their real names, and with some, I believe basically in people trying whenever possible to use their real names on the internet at large, because I believe it makes for more useful civil discourse. So we're still going, we're going to keep going. I'm trying to do legalities, like for the first time, I've set up an actual business structure and we're trying to convert to a nonprofit because it never got the foundation or any of the legals done. And so I'm sort of in a chicken or the egg question. I can't recruit new writers until I get the technology a little bit fixed. So I'm sort of juggling back and forth, but I'm very interested in Larry's project because we in Citizendium have no exposure. I mean, we're so far down in the search engines. And it's partly a function of the bad software, the old software, but it's also just a function of it being a small project, but nevertheless a valuable project. For example, I'll give you one project that I'm working on now is to write a history of the town I grew up in, which is in Tennessee. And if you've ever looked at any of the articles about towns in Wikipedia, you'll notice that all the bad things that ever happened are disappeared. I first noticed this, I was looking at an article about Buchenwald, or one of the Nazi death camps, and the town where it was located had completely disassociated itself with this history. And then the town where I grew up, there was never segregation. There were never segregated schools. There was never Jim Crow. There was never Trail of Tears kicking out the Indians. None of that ever happened. And I'm like, well, we can do better. We can write an article that's not condemning. And so this is a real challenge because we still have the encyclopedic ideals that Wikipedia has. We want references, we want collaboration, because I firmly believe that more sets of eyes can lead to better material. So that's where I'm at. I'm working on this tiny little project that has no exposure. We have about 20,000 articles. Most of them are really crappy. About 2,000 of them are pretty good. Maybe a couple hundred of them are really good. And they're worth preserving. It costs very little to at least preserve them. So that's where we are. We'd like to grow it. And just hearing all of you, Sergei, Phil, and Leslie, I want to contact each of you offline because I have ideas and questions for you. Probably not appropriate for this forum, but I love the intros so far. That's it.
Very good. Thank you, Pat. I appreciate that. And you know, I look forward to helping you sort of relaunch it. And I hope that we can find some developers for you sometime. Maybe somebody watching this can actually step in.
Yeah, well, the domain still has a lot of visibility, as the domain name alone has value. So
yeah,
even though it has haters.
Yeah, no, I my guess is there's somebody watching this who can step up and do some basic MediaWiki stuff. And yeah, very good. Thanks. Sam Kazemian, one of the co-founders of Everipedia, the Encyclopedia of Everything, or Everybody's Encyclopedia, which I think is the new tagline, right, Sam?
Yeah, hey guys. I think I'm rounding out the intros, right? Am I the last one? Let me see if I can share my screen with you guys. 1 second. Can everyone see my screen fully?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Hey guys, so yeah, I'm Sam, the president and one of the co-founders of Everipedia. And as Larry said, we're one of the, I think actually the only, to my knowledge, obviously there's a big world out there that uses blockchain and cryptocurrency technology mixed with wiki editing and knowledge incentives. And as Larry said before, we take a slightly, modernized, colorful approach. So this is the homepage of Everipedia. As you can see, because of like our crypto incentive system and things like that, a lot of the new articles that are written are actually about cryptocurrency and these things like that. Like, for example, if I click one of these, you kind of feel like it's a kind of familiar wiki / Wikipedia type design. Things are just a little bit, it's a little bit more modern. Things are pretty much the same. Design, hover over tags, things like that. The cool part about Everipedia is the IQ token, which is its own native cryptocurrency. Everyone that edits as well as stakes to curate essentially uses the IQ cryptocurrency. In fact, you can see I'm logged into one of my accounts here. I have very little IQ tokens, but you can see the worth there is about $4.18. One of the cool things about using a cryptocurrency, this is CoinMarketCap, which is a website for cryptocurrency prices and trading. In fact, some people call this the Wikipedia of cryptocurrency prices, and call Everipedia the Wikipedia of cryptocurrencies, since we do articles of everything, but mainly technology and cryptocurrency. But as you can see here, Everipedia's IQ token is thankfully up almost 3% today. But one of the cool things that I like to highlight is we're one of the largest cryptocurrencies in the world. In fact, if you take a look at our market cap, it is 168 million, with $51 million traded in the past 24 hours. So Everipedia is actually very, very large, and it's growing, and the technology is very unique. In fact, you can go on the site and take a look at the activity of the platform, and you can see it's quite active. For example, you could see here 17 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, 23 minutes ago, 31 minutes ago. So just in the past hour, if we scroll down about, you have about 10 edits per hour that actually is on the blockchain itself. So in fact, if we go to one of these articles, one of the things you will see, and this is the edit history page. So what it'll show here is the type of edit that's going to be loaded here. You can even see the blockchain transaction ID here. But for most non-blockchain technical people, it's just here's the content. But if you actually scroll all the way down you'll see these references and similar things. But if you scroll all the way down here, you'll actually see this hash here. And I know Larry knows well what that means. That it is a peer-to-peer hosting protocol. So these articles and data is actually hosted on a peer-to-peer system, and the incentivization layer is on the blockchain. And so what's very cool about this is when you view any of these articles on Everipedia, Everipedia is just a client. It is a web application. So
hey, Sam, could I interrupt? I'm just curious if you could like grab that ID, that hash, and put it into an IPFS viewer and see the same article. That's basically what you're saying is possible, right?
Yeah, that's what's possible. I think here the CSS is not going to load. It's just a JSON of the article structure. So basically, what you'd have to do, so what you would have to do is you would have to have a way to display it. Otherwise, it's going to kind of just look like a blob. In fact, you can even view it through an API that we have ourselves, and I can actually send you guys in a follow-up email both IPFS. I mean, the IPFS is on every page, but also direct access to our API as well. But yes, you can try to go to this hash, and it should work minus the CSS. Obviously, you can reskin this. And so overall, we also have prediction markets, which is a very experimental thing. It's not in the realm of wiki editing, but because all of our incentivization and things are based on cryptocurrencies and market dynamics, we're experimenting with prediction markets as a source of knowledge and knowledge generation in a decentralized manner. It's fairly simple to use. You can create a wiki here about, and check out our blog for the latest protocol releases and things like that. And it's going very well. And obviously, as Larry said, Larry helped us with kind of the original knowledge protocol, like foundations and rules, and our content policy. He's had a pretty big impact on how we think about the design of the system. And another cool thing, about this is that obviously the Encyclosphere can pull the IPFS hashes or structured metadata of these articles, and it is very cool. And just to kind of be clear about how encompassing Everipedia is with the every word, we have a lot of people, cryptocurrencies, even science, as Larry said, we import Wikipedia originally and build on top of it. So even though a lot of the homepage, as you guys saw, was trending, cryptocurrencies and colorful things, there is obviously a lot of science and everything like that as well. So obviously we go deep in every topic. So that's Everipedia for a few minutes for you guys. Thanks. Very
good. Thanks for that, Sam. Glad to hear that it's going well. So what I wanted to do next, basically, is give you all an introduction, maybe a bit of an update about the Encyclosphere project. And so what I would actually have people watching this do, maybe after this whole roundtable, is to look for the 2-minute video and the 5-minute videos introducing the project, because they might be able to convey things better than I will in the following. But this is how I like to introduce the concept of the Encyclosphere project. So imagine you want to contribute to the world's biggest encyclopedia. It's one that has become practically synonymous with encyclopedia, the word. If you want to do that, you have to participate on wikipedia.org. That means you have to learn how to play a game which is quite dysfunctional with a difficult community. Now, as we have just seen, there are plenty of other encyclopedias, and they're good encyclopedias, but as we've already heard, the content doesn't rank more highly than Wikipedia. In fact, frequently, the content doesn't appear on the first page of search results at all. Everipedia is actually downranked, even on things that it has original articles on, because basically Google doesn't like the fact that it's partly a mirror of Wikipedia.
Larry, can I comment at this
Sure.
point, because that's exactly relevant. I just made a little test. I look at the 2 articles from Citizendium and from Wikipedia. Very different articles. It's about a topic called Ether, electronics.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when you Google it, you find immediately this article in Wikipedia. Citizendium even doesn't show up in the first 5 pages of Google search. And I have no idea why, because they are very different articles written by different, presumably, people.
Yes.
And that's something which is very, very important to figure out what exactly happening to Google and other search engines, why they even, like ignoring completely other resources, and so focused on one single resource like Wikipedia, and written by, we even don't know by whom and
Yes.
by what people.
Right, so agreed. So basically, these encyclopedias are a part of a long tail of encyclopedic content and might as well not exist as far as search engines are concerned. Their content should be a lot easier to find when people are looking for encyclopedia articles. That is the idea behind the Encyclosphere project. Basically, we wish to create a content network for the long tail of encyclopedic content in roughly the same way that the blogosphere is a network of blogs. So just as there is no master or a leader of blogging, so also there will be no master or a leader of encyclopedia writing. The new Encyclosphere will, in other words, be decentralized in that way. So basically, let me explain what we've been up to and what we're going to do going forward. So a lot of what we've done in the last year is just getting the nonprofit going and working on some ancillary projects, and just getting to where we are now, launching this seminar has taken longer than I had hoped. Nevertheless, what we're thinking of doing next is building essentially an encyclopedia reader app. So essentially what would be, and this is a good way to sort of illustrate the concept behind the Encyclosphere. Just imagine that you had an app that enabled you to search across all encyclopedias and see at least the open content content. In fact, so all of you have open content articles. So Ballotpedia, Handwiki, Citizendium, Everipedia. Isn't that going to be the case with Botipedia as well, Phil?
Yeah, this is just an academic research project that I have at INSEAD where I demo the use of natural language processing and things like that, natural language generation. So there's no notion right now of doing anything other than just letting people use it.
Yeah, okay. So in the case of some encyclopedias, then obviously we will just have links to their stuff, and we'll obviously track metadata about the articles. So the idea then is that we want to collect information about all the encyclopedia articles that are out there in the world. We want to assemble it in a way that is standardized. So that's just a metadata, but we also want to actually organize the articles themselves and make them available, and all in the same format. So here's the question then. Essentially, the question that I'm going to be wanting to discuss with you in general is what are the requirements of such a project? Now, there's other things that we will want to be doing as well. Like I said, we've been developing a meta search engine for encyclopedias, and another thing that is going to be part of this is that the whole notion of an aggregator. In other words, something that works behind the scenes and accepts updates from all over the place, not just your encyclopedias, but from dozens or hundreds more, as well as just individual articles that people post on the web as if they were like individual blog posts, right? And then they submit. They should be able to press a button and submit it, and then it goes into a common pool. So there has to be some organizations, hopefully more than one, because we don't want it centralized again. Should be a number of different organizations that aggregate all of that information together. So these are all different examples of the software that we will need, which will be components. So that's why one of the questions that I'm asking on the seminar forum on encyclosphere.org, you can find the link in the menu on the top. One of the questions that I ask there is, what should be the component projects of the Encyclosphere, and what is the top priority one, in your opinion? So let's just call that my own rough introduction. So here's the first question that I'd like to ask you all. I'm not really sure how we're going to want to do this, and I don't want to use too much of your time. I should actually ask you right now, does anyone have anything like a hard stop in the next half hour to an hour? Any constraints in that?
I have a stop in a little bit due to the engineering meeting that I was telling you about. We moved forward a little bit.
That's fine. Okay, so we'll maybe what we should do is hear from you first, Sam. And I'm going to sort of read the questions that I had prepared to talk with you all, and I'd like to just sort of like get your reaction to whichever of them is most interesting to you. So here's a few. What do you think of the idea of publishing your metadata and your content in a standardized format? I actually think I already know the answer to that one, Sam, because you actually already do that, or at least it could be standardized.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, not only, like you said, do we do that in terms of making the data, I mean, we already do that in the sense that a blockchain is kind of a standardized database format that, you know, people running nodes of the blockchain essentially
Sure,
write
but
to.
that
And
doesn't mean that it has like particular fields that are relevant to like searching an encyclopedia.
right, exactly. So what I mean to say is that we have extensive experience making sure all of our articles and data actually meets a public standardized schema. And so adding extra and new data standards so that it's compliant with a new standard, such as the Knowledge Standards Foundation, is not only easy, but also logical to do. So definitely.
Very good. We are thinking of making a white label encyclopedia reader, as I was explaining. Perhaps we would start with a desktop, but I would actually like it to be a mobile app.
Larry, what do you mean by white label?
White labeled, I mean, basically it's not software that we would publish ourselves. It would work like Chromium, so that anyone could take it and put their own branding on it and adapt it however they wanted, and then sort of launch their own version, so to speak, if that makes sense. So then the question is, as far as I know, none of your projects have mobile apps yet. And you have some feedback on that idea. Could you see adapting the software for your
In
own
fact,
app?
I definitely want to make sure to say Everipedia has never had a mobile app. And in fact, we would really like that. In fact, I think that would be an extremely big value add, especially because I don't think anyone here, like you said, has one. Although one thing I would like to say is I think that while the mobile app would be great as like a white label, I think the first actual, you know, white label usage would be ideal for the actual like KSM, for an open source, you know, branded version, because we obviously have a lot of overhead and also the fact that we don't have mobile experience, which I assume a lot of people on this call might not have as much mobile experience as they would like as well, given that other people have even said even desktop resources for software is a little lacking. So perhaps the best way to do it is to obviously white label it in the standards of open source and access and things like that. But the canonical kind of representation of the implementation, perhaps not even call it canonical, but the first implementation of it could be a KSM branded one. And this can actually be at least promoted in Everipedia, and I assume a lot of our other things, as one of the supported mobile application versions of the
Well,
platform.
Sam, let me respond to that. I'll tell you why we aren't going to do that. And that is that we don't want to be in competition with you all or with any encyclopedia. So we regard ourselves as being a sort of like industry support group, but I actually think of our real constituency as not being the encyclopedists and the publishers so much as the actual users, the readers. If we did, my fear is that if we did come up with an encyclopedia reader, that it would become, it would have a potential anyway of dominating all by basically being essentially what it would look like to the end user is the biggest encyclopedia, and you know, and the most useful and so forth. And that just isn't what we want to do. In fact, we want to work hard against that actually happening. We want there to be multiple instances of this, multiple versions, in the same way that there shouldn't be a single browser if we can avoid it, right? It's a good thing that Brave and Firefox exist, and various others too now, in addition to Chrome. And even if Chrome is the 800-pound gorilla, so in the same way, we want to make it as easy as possible from the very beginning to have some non-canonical, non-official versions of everything. And in fact, there shouldn't be a canonical or an official encyclopedia reader app, basically because that, again, well, I'm repeating myself. I just don't want to become centralized. I don't want the organization that I've started here at the KSF to become a target of the establishment, basically wanting to like take it over in order to, be able to have control over all encyclopedia or all reference publishing. So that would be bad. So hope that's clear. A couple of others. What are the some other requirements? And I'm going to get the rest of you in on all of these questions later. I thought we'd let Sam have an opportunity to speak since he has to leave earlier. What are some other requirements you would like to see satisfied for any part, actually, of the whole Encyclosphere architecture? Whether it be that mobile app or anything else. Any ideas?
Could I speak for a minute on this?
Sure.
Well, I'm concerned about standards. I just try to imagine how it might work. And let's say somebody wants to make a database of encyclopedic articles pulled from all of our different encyclopedias and others.
Yes.
And, well, there's the way Google does it, where it sends out a bot and it grabs whatever is available on the public internet. And then there's the way other organizations do it. There's a thing in biology called the tree of life, where organizations feed their catalogs of species data into this thing. And so it's push rather than pull.
Yeah.
So I don't know. In order to just prototype something, we need an architecture, we need some standards just to play with.
Yeah.
And so my gut says, as a computer scientist, come up with something, even though you don't want to own it, and prototype it and see how it works. For example, one requirement that Citizendium needs is not to have everything indexed. We want to be able to, and this is a little bit antithetical to your idea of no censorship, but we want to be able to curate which articles go out, because some of them just are not in the shape. We don't want to delete them.
Requirement. That's absolutely a key requirement.
Right.
We want to enable professional organizations to have their own branded versions of this, and just include the very specific number of articles written by their members or whatever.
So, but Larry, are you averse to prototyping something and playing around with it? I know you don't want to own it.
No, I am very open to it. In fact, that's what I'm proposing. It's just that I don't want us to be the ones to host and label it, I guess. We don't, in other words, it can be sort of like co-branded, I suppose you might say.
Well, I mean, you can make it a subsidiary and independent or something, but somebody's just got to build something and see how it works and tinker with it.
The software, we want someone else to to host it, to play with it, to adapt it to their needs, etc. So yeah, for sure.
Larry, if I can share a little bit of experience. Because I've been involved in the publishing industry since the about 1998 or so, like that, there was this massive movement on two fronts in terms of this question that you're posing. Let me put a bucket, call it metadata for the moment. And what happened is a lot of different people were coming up with metadata for the publishing industry. Amazon had its metadata requirements if you ingested their books to them. The Library of Congress had their metadata, the MARC records, if you remember back in the book days. OCLC had theirs. It was just total chaos. And what ultimately happened was a group of people got together and said, let's develop the standards, and they called it Onyx, O-N-I-X. And what happened was it's developed, and you can go to the website where it's located. It has a huge number of fields and a lot of values those fields can have. And you can actually use that as a default for metadata already. The tricky part is if anyone has market power, it doesn't matter what the Onyx standard is. You have to adapt to that standard. In other words, when you submit your metadata to Google for them to do a sitemap of your thing, you have to put it in their format, no matter what the Onyx standard is. When you want to submit something to Amazon, which has a lot of market power in the publishing industry, you have to adapt to their standard. So in essence, I would recommend that if you want to create a standard that people adopt, you don't do the intersection or what you think is the best standard, but try to do the union of what people will force people to ultimately do. Because for the now, people like Pat and Leslie, me, Sergey, we're hacking together our own systems, and we have our own fields that we are comfortable using. Yeah. I know for my case, just as one example, what codes do you use for languages? That's an interesting. Do I use the ISO codes? Do I use the ethnologue codes? Turns out that ISO doesn't recognize a lot of small languages. They're just not there yet. They haven't made a code for it. That little thing alone, you could spend a year on how to come up with codes for darn languages.
Oh, yeah. So I've done a lot of database work for biology. It's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. ZMaze L dot, ZMaze L dot 15, there's 14 ways to call corn something, right? So you have to have a taxonomy, a thesaurus of every biological entity to and from every other biological entity. It's crazy.
Yeah, and locations are the same. Which location standard, oh boy.
Even timestamps are incredible, complicated, right? So what you might want to consider as an idea is don't debate what the standard should be. That's going to take a lot of time.
Yeah.
One thing you can do is simply rip off is a strong word, but just borrow from the biggest standards that are already there that people might be able to. We had to develop our own custom ones. Yeah. We had to, because these languages had no codes, and we decided to use the name of the language that ethnologue uses. It's a long string. It's not very sexy. It's hard to type it in as a variable, but at least it's unique and it works, right? So that's something we had to do. For geographies, do you use the long name of a country, a short name? Etc. There's all these kind of weird things that are out there, and you can get into a quagmire of Onyx. And Onyx worked for years and years and years. And the publishing firm that I'm involved in, we don't even use Onyx. Nobody takes it. Nobody uses it. It's like weird, but it's there. Yeah. And Reuters, Bloomberg, all these different distributors of content to businesses and stuff, they all have their own thing, and they require a certain feed that goes into their API pipeline. So this reader that you're describing, if you want to create such a thing, you might need to just get permissions from different encyclopedists and then hack together a thing that will make it work and develop a standard that's actionable, as opposed to
just prototype it, just do it.
Yeah, I think rapid application development, 3 days with a crowd of developers, and they have to have a blue smoke version done by the end of the week. So, and then that will highlight some of the weirdness that might be involved. So
I agree. And you'll have something to demo.
So we sort of have already, have started already doing this. So we have this Encyclosearch and FactSeek, which is essentially they looked at different encyclopedias. When you search a word, they just go to encyclopedias and they fetch index from database, and they present results. So this way you can kind of avoid this problem of Google or other big search engines, which essentially only look first at Wikipedia, and then they look at all other encyclopedias somewhere on page number 10. Right. So the problem is that, of course, all these big corporations, they just care about Wikipedia right now. And on Google, obviously, because Google works with Wikipedia right now. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to normalize this. We wanted to have fair way of searching for some terms using wiki type of encyclopedias. So as I said, we've done this already. At this moment, you can search a term or word using this type of resource. but they will simply redirect user to, let's say, Wikipedia or other resources. So it's just a redirect or L redirect. What we wanted to know is how to get this done by not only redirecting users to such resources, but keeping our own style for all those different Wikipedias, wiki resources, sorry. And one way of doing this is, of course, to fetch wiki code and parse this wiki code into HTML and do this in kind of inconsistent way. So in this particular case, I think this would require quite a lot of resources from us, because parsing and using all these templates and images, it's a lot of CPU usage. Another way of doing is like you Phil is doing, just get HTML, yes, or cache files, HTML files, and and reformat them by changing style files and all of this. This is, I think, possible. And the only question is how you do update in real time. If something has changed on a, let's say, Wikipedia, how do we know that our HTML file is sufficiently updated? I think in this particular case, I think there are not much of CPU resources involved, because we're just displaying HTML file which are stored in our local database. But how to update our local database with with all these updates in other wikis? This is, I think this is a problem. So right now, I'm thinking about HTML file. Probably this is the easiest, but I'm not sure. Even HTML file is not very easy, because we need to maintain our own style files, and also we need to be able to store maybe figures. I don't know, and already directing figures to MediaWiki Commons. So this kind of question we wanted to know: should we do this? Keep our own database and index, or maybe we'll just do it in some other way? Is there some other standard file format which is easier to handle on our servers?
Well, I was thinking more in terms of each encyclopedia providing an index in some standard format, and anybody can come and get the index. And the index wouldn't be like having to scrape an HTML page. And it would be up to each encyclopedia to update its index at its own schedule.
But this we already done, I think. So we are using index of different pedias, all right? We kind of always looking at, in terms of MediaWiki, we are looking at special search, right? URL, which give us.
But I mean, what format is that index in?
HTML. So we fetch HTML. We fetch HTML results from the search.
Yeah, parsing that is impossible. It changes.
Yes.
I mean, in my opinion, we need something like XML.
XML is then, that's another option, I think.
One thing you might want to consider as a very first step is set up a dummy WordPress page where someone actually does an encyclopedia content. You create the button, say upload to, and you create the pipeline in a minimalist way with only 2 paragraphs and maybe an image or something simple. And then say, okay, well, if this is generalizable, where someone like me says, okay, someone at the bottom of a Botipedia page and say upload to the Encyclosphere because they like it or whatever, or they want to copy it, boom, it goes. And that whole pipeline is non-trivial, because who's going to store that stuff? Who's going to, if there's going to be a cache, for example, and will it pull and ping that site coming back and going, oh, let me go back to it, hit that button automatically. Do I give people permissions across domains to do these things? This is a really new world kind of thing. But if you minimally say, let's create the minimal mousetrap that works end to end, might be interesting to see what kind of weird problems arise, right?
Yeah, so I have already kind of made some estimates about how space do we need. In case of, for example, Handwiki, I'm using the file cache, right? So I'm keeping HTML files in a zipped format. and this is about 10 gigabytes. In case of Wikipedia, that would be 60 gigabytes. So it's not very big resource, right? 10 million articles,
Right.
10 million files, and 60 gigabytes, not big deal. And the big deal is how to update this in real time. So if somebody wants to make some change in Wikipedia, how do I know on my server that that change has been done and my HTML file needs to be recreated from Wikipedia?
Well, so you're planning to hold the content. I don't think you should hold a copy of the content. I think they should always have to go to the source for the content. If it's been updated, they'll see the latest. You should hold keywords, headers, authors, dates, something.
Well, that's
simple.
an interesting, that's
Drop
an
dead
interesting
simple.
question. And so basically you're
In real
saying
time, right, yeah.
that the content should always be served from the original source.
Yeah, keep it simple, stupid. Just the search index should be the simplest possible thing because there are performance issues, believe me. I have done a lot of work in performance, and Google, half their staff is devoted to just making things work fast because they're trying to search all the content everywhere.
Sure.
That approach won't work for us.
All right,
It has to be
this will
primitive.
work. Absolutely, because media, if you are talking about MediaWiki, it provides this IP.php access, which creates HTML file. Actually, it can also fetch like 10 sentences from article. So it can create in real-time HTML, and we can bring it to our server and keep it and make cache, our own cache for, until something has changed on Wikipedia. Yeah, this is absolutely possible. The only thing we need to think how to maintain our own style files, because we wanted to, of course, to preserve structure of articles and templates and images. Yeah, that's a very good suggestion. So I think we can try to do this.
I think minimally you'd have to have that. Otherwise, there's no project at all.
Yeah.
And then after, you can think of fancier stuff with certain publishers or whatever. But minimally, if you can't index, what we discovered in ours for this little button I called Encyclopedias, right? Where we basically crawled 360 million domain names. And then within that, billions of pages. And lo and behold, there are thousands of encyclopedias. Thousands in different languages, what the word encyclopedia translated in Greek or whatever. They're all over the place. Like a little biology department will have a little encyclopedia. There'll be the Kew Botanical Gardens, like you said, and the Encyclopedia of Life, the EOL files and all that. They're all over the place.
Yeah, but we were discussing that there are two different ways of indexing stuff. Pat, as Pat says, there's a push way and a pull way. In other words, we can crawl over the stuff and like shoehorn it into our own, and that's basically scraping, right? That requires a lot of scraping. The whole idea of having a standard, though, is to avoid having to scrape. So one thing that I was thinking of doing is like starting with a group like this and declaring in advance, okay, these are the fields that we want. Would you be able to then actually push a file in some canonical location at your domain that we could just download every 5 minutes or whatever?
Yeah, yes, something simple. And I mean, I have other data. For my day job, I have thousands of species of algae and I have catalogs on them. This kind of algae data is falling off the web. It's disappearing.
Right.
I mean, algae specialists are so rare in the world. And there were like 10 servers that published this sort of data. And during the Trump years, almost all of them went broke. My server is one of the last ones limping along. There's maybe 5 left where you can look up algae data, like really detailed crap. This stuff should be considered encyclopedia articles.
Right.
Wow.
And, could definitely create an index, and then people could pull down the page and they could see everything that has been databased about that algae species at the Academy of Natural Sciences since 1960. Every piece of data is on those pages, but you don't want to scrape that data. You just want to get an index of it.
Right.
Yeah. So this is the thing that I was thinking of doing by way of like getting us started. One of the next pieces of the puzzle for my son's project here. Let me share this. Just a minute here. Let me actually pull it up entirely first. Sorry. Okay, it's not responding properly. Okay. Okay.
Larry, while you're doing that,
Yeah, go ahead.
The idea is that we create a file that can then be pulled. If you use the philosophy of reduce the transaction cost to the encyclopedist, you wouldn't tell us what the standard should be. We'll just have a file, because that's what other people will have. They'll have whatever they have. And then your system would be able to have a thesaurus across these different standards. So therefore it's uniform, maybe, as an idea. Because if you do it the other way, like the Onyx approach, you're going to force people to invest development time to create and follow. And it's complicated, these standards, right? Even to read them. So it's another way of doing it and saying, hey, here's my site map, or here's my whatever it is that people call it.
All right. And you're saying have Encyclosphere write little bridges that somehow standardize that stuff.
Yeah, this is what we did for ourselves in biodiversity. We found out that people call dirt, the different types of soil, they call them different things. So rather than have them rewrite, we didn't ask them to rewrite it. We just brought it in and said, oh, there's a thesaurus. That's the same thing. And it's a bit of an investment to do, of course, because someone has to be an expert and know what they're doing. But that's maybe more easy to get adoption, because then we just had to get permissions. Can we use your soil data? And they said, sure.
So maybe make some suggestions of the kind of stuff you need. I don't know, titles, headers, authors, dates, size. Just minimal. Give us these 5 things. And if you want to give us more, fine.
Yeah. And some people might write the word title with title or title X, and you should live with that. And then just say, these are the following things that go to title, because that becomes the standard harmonizer, right? It's a harmonizer system that can go into whatever thing you want.
Yeah, so I was assuming that what you're saying is something that we would have to do basically. So we'll say what sort of things we want you to do in your database query. So just give us the output of the query, and then we'll take it from there, or we'll make it more broadly available, and then different aggregators perhaps will take it from there. And I hope that like a lot of the practices and the software of MediaWiki will actually help this to be standardized somewhat. At least when, again, we're just talking about the metadata. When we're talking about the articles themselves, then things get a lot more complicated, because then you're actually having to. Anyway, so I am sharing my screen here, and I just wanted to like illustrate the some things here. This is what this tool does is it simply searches different search engines of the different encyclopedias. And as you can see here, it has a number of different categories of encyclopedias, and then you can look at the individual encyclopedias here. So they're all selected except for Wikipedia. And so if you search for Darfur, then well, it actually comes up with an article there on, but I misspelled it. Yes, it gives you essentially the Wikipedia article as served by Everipedia and encyclopedia.org, which I believe is Columbia Encyclopedia. And here's a stub on Citizendium. That's nice. Britannica here, etc. So the idea is what we want to do is, instead of searching these individual instead of sending the query to the search engines of different encyclopedias, we want to have collected all of our data in our own database, collected from you all, essentially, from some sort of database query. And then so that the data would be constantly up to date, and it would be like 10 times faster. So that it seems to me would be a good place to begin, as long as you're just talking about making an indexer, as you say.
I think, Larry, so this would happen when you click on this link, like, right? So at this moment, when you do just search, nothing would be fetched from Wikipedia or other pedias. But when you click on any of this link, first you go to that location, to this encyclopedia, but at the same time you are fetching HTML file on our server, right? That's what we want.
Yeah.
And then we keep it and we'll preserve it.
Yeah.
So
I do have
maybe
a question about this.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I do have a question about this, Larry. So
Please,
can I
please.
just jump in?
Leslie, we haven't heard enough from you.
Okay, so I really like the way this looks, and I want to sort of walk through or think through or talk about what my experience is of search. So this is cool because a lot of times when I search a phrase or a word just on Google search, what I'm looking for is an encyclopedic overview, or what I'm looking for is an article that has a lot of information about it, about the topic, presented in a somewhat dispassionate way, whatever that might mean. So and I know that I want an encyclopedic overview. So knowing that, it would make sense for me to come over here and just search here, because then I'm going to get 20 or 30 different encyclopedia style entries to choose from, as opposed to what would happen if I searched for the object of interest on Google, which would be a bunch of riffraff links, right? That I don't want clogging up my search results. I don't want to have the search result of the candidate's Twitter page clogging up my search results, et cetera. I just want the encyclopedic articles. Okay. With that in mind, is there any way that you can clue me in as a user about which one of these links I'm likely to actually want to click on?
Yeah, I was going to ask about ranking. How did it put one thing at the top?
Sure. Essentially, right now, there is no way on this site. But what I have sort of planned is to enable people through the same standards, using the same publishing network, I hope, to also publish ratings of articles. So I can imagine the American Medical Association, for example, setting up an encyclopedia reader. And the front end looks like this. And instead of saying EncycloSearch, it'll say like the AMA Encyclopedia Search. And then the idea is they could, search on so like lung cancer. And then the people who are signed into their system, if they have the rights to do it, again, imagine this is the AMA Encyclopedia Search. So their own branded version of an encyclopedia reader. So then there would be like the ability there to actually give ratings, perhaps on different dimensions of the different articles that are there. And of course, you'd be able to, click through. Now, you'd actually go to a different URL if you go to infoplease.com. But if you go to Ballotpedia, then you'll actually see the article itself. Or if you go to it on some other public domain or open content source. And then you'll be able to go through it and presumably different encyclopedias would have different ways of rating articles, and then the ratings themselves would be decentralized, I would hope, so that somebody could aggregate the ratings in different ways.
Yeah, Larry, this is already useful, except for the fact that it comes up in random order. I mean, I don't know how to fix that. I looked at coal mining, which is one of the articles I like on Citizendium, and I think we're down there in the list somewhere, but at least it found it.
Yeah.
Larry, if I could just go a quick share with, is that all right?
Yeah, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
One of the things that we're doing, because we're doing everything via algorithm, having no judgment of, like, we don't have editorial staff or anything. One of the tricks that we find that people really get excited about is letting them, like Leslie's problem about, I only want this stuff, I don't want that stuff, implies a scale. Now, it could be a 2-3-dimensional scale, or it could be just linear. Linear is the one people mostly understand. So I type in the word Trump and you get, there's a researcher, there's a name, there's different types of Trump and stuff. But what's really interesting when you click on this, like, news, and we have a news section farther down, just this little slider here saying, I really want the right-wing news, or I want the left-wing news. We're using the Princeton scale, right? So we're not even bothering trying to figure out if something's left-wing or right-wing. We have about 20 scales we created for every piece of knowledge. One is it very quantitative, right? i.e., does it have a lot of numbers in it? Is it personal or impersonal? What pronouns are used in it? Is it exaggeration or non-exaggeration? Does it have adjectives or adverbs? All that we can do without having judgment of people saying it's this. We have, for example, here a thing called talk, which is chit chat up here. We don't have editors talking, so we just kind of dump stuff from Reddit and all these kind of forums and things. Oh, my guys turned it off. That's too bad. Oh no, here it is. It's down here a little bit. Blogs and popular stuff and hot links from different people and subreddits and all this kind of stuff.
Wow.
And then you add
Really cool.
scales on top of this, scales on top of that. And then we said, well, why don't you just design your own darn encyclopedia? And so then we said, okay, well, create your own tabs, create your own thing. And like Ballotpedia, absolutely love Ballotpedia. I love this thing. And I was thinking, well, maybe we should take Legiscan, right? And just index that. Oh, but there's also the congressional record. That's interesting. And there's also people who comment about that. That's Judicial Watch or whoever, blah, 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 blah. And we created a graph of everything to everything. And then you say, I'm interested in jazz, put a pin in it. I'm interested in fly fishing, another pin. I'm interested in Buddhism, pin. And then it searches in spheres, if you want to call it that, from the graph, hitting the most natural thing. So you determine the sort order, not us. So that's what we're developing. So and this is a liberty some people we've found in focus groups aren't used to.
That is so interesting. If I could just jump in, because probably 5 or 6 years ago, I was sort of sketching out the ideal node on Ballotpedia, which would be about an event. So what's an event that recently happened in our political life? We could say Joe Biden's speech of a couple of days ago about the new vaccine mandates. Well, great. Yes, you would like an encyclopedic overview of that, of the key elements of it. And you can all imagine what that might look like. But then, as you were saying, Philip, you know what? On a given day, you don't want to read that anymore. You already read it. What you want to know today is what they're saying in the chitty chatty places about it, right?
Yeah.
And then, or you might want to have just a list of who the most influential people are who've had something to say about it. Or, it's not, you don't always just want the object of interest being the encyclopedic overview. There are other things you want. So there's this nodal thing, and you want to be able to leap out and get these other things. And that would be very cool if you could do that.
In Wikipedia, we found a heading, which was called headlines. And it just listed a bunch of headlines from the news. You'll notice that in Wikipedia's homepage, they have today in the news, right? Yeah. Have you ever seen that? Okay. So we decided to say, all right, we took all the RSS feeds of every known RSS feed we could find, right? Scraping. Then we just simply ingest them every 15 minutes with a loop, right? On a server. And so if you type in Biden controversy, that will be very different 15 minutes later in our Botipedia article, that's called an external link, right? So it's way at the bottom, right? And it's news, and it's an external link with the keywords you typed in. This is why Larry is kind of saying, well, if you take my external links and put it at the top, it looks like a search engine.
Yeah.
But you can dial your own bias.
Yeah, very
Whatever you
interesting, because then you can see the knowledge grow. Like people on the internet, of course, we all are worried about how to filter through all the static and all the noise. So that's one reason that there are encyclopedic overviews, is that people experience a profound need to filter through all of that stuff. And in a way, your system allows people to see all the chaos, as it were, but in different
Right.
ordered buckets.
Right. And to see
Yeah.
that there are biases,
Yeah.
just
And
right out there, right, left. People
two
read
reactions.
news and they don't even think, is this right or left?
Yeah, there's two reactions that I get from so far in our focus groups to this kind of notion. If I can screen share again, is let me just type in the word glioblastoma. And this is where I might call you, Pat, and others here about this kind of problem. I type this word in, and it has like some, I'm in the talk section, sorry, I had an article. If you type this in, it kind of says, all right, here is a definition, here are some causes, signs, and symptoms, very terse. But if you really want to know about all the controversy about glioblastoma treatment, for example, you click more, and then it just dumps. And it goes crazy. Now, this is all about protocols and applications of glioblastoma treatments. It goes farther and farther and farther. It just never ends. And then you just kind of say, well, I'm interested in, whatever, hydrocyte. I don't even know what that is. I mean, to be honest with you, we can do this kind of weird drilling. So one thing that people find interesting in their freedom is to, I want an article on this, even if there isn't one, and they just create it. There it is. There's our article on this thing with didactic. So we've scored all knowledge on a didactic scale. The second thing that makes people very emotional, like, oh my gosh, this is interesting, is the fact that it's in their local language. So when you click on these things in the other using auto translation, people almost tear up going, oh my, I didn't even know this content existed. Like imagine seeing something about a disease for the first time ever in your own language.
Philip, do you do Thai? Do you do any Thai language?
Yes, yeah, we do. For example,
Google has never become good at Thai. I have a former student from Thailand.
What we decided to do is do the 95% rule, 95% of the world's population, 95% of the world's GDP, and then a few underserved languages that can be used as kind of showcases to another language, saying, hey, would you like to put this in your language? Here's what we were able to do for Chichewa, or here's what we were able to do with et cetera. So that's what we decided to do just strategically. It's kind of a showcase. So go for the low-hanging fruit kind of stuff first. And then go from there. Yeah, but I tell you, just that little thing about, like you said, Leslie, giving people the option to say, so it might be, Pat, that for coal mining, we call your content, Pat, in our group, we call it golden. This is stuff that's so well written. Why would you have a computer even touch it? Never. But we cite it to you according to Citizendium, according to that, and then quote, indent, and that's it. Now, I'm an academic, so I have rights of fair use to show it as part of an educational project, but it links to you from my page. There's no references at the bottom. There's a little external link, click, and it goes to your thing, right? It goes to your site. If your content is with permissions, golden. So we reached out to people for golden content.
So Philip and Sergei are already doing some sort of indexing, as well as Larry's son.
Yeah.
Which I think it would be fun to have a comparison session on these someday.
Yeah, for sure.
And just talk through the technology. I mean, I'm fascinated by
Maybe
this.
I should mention that actually we are relying on indexing from encyclopedias, from other encyclopedias. We're just fetching search result from external Wikipedias. But in principle, yeah, in future we're gonna to indexing, and then algorithm would be very, very important to
Well, I mean, yeah,
implement.
The machine learning approach we have to look at that's a completely different thing than the deterministic kind of the thing Larry did. I mean, I would just love to kind of understand what's under the hood of each of these in terms of thinking about where a prototype or an implementation might go.
You mean the technology stack, you mean?
Yeah, or just, how you did it, whether it could encompass all of our encyclopedias?
The philosophy that we used was free because I don't want to pay vendors, right? So is like, so
Free and not Wikipedia.
well, it's not, that's not really soft, but like the real stack at the bottom, you know, so what's the
Right.
OS, what's the database structure, what's, you know, going all the way to the top, we basically.
No, I don't care about that. What I care about is how the information is being gotten, how it's being databased, performance issues,
I see.
tunability. I mean, I really like this idea of allowing people to see the biases in their own search.
Yeah. You know, there's another thing that I didn't mention that I do want to work on, which is basically enabling people to label themselves. So if we're going to actually track ratings of articles, then we want to make sure that we can re-identify people across the system so that there aren't like multiple ratings of that are originated by the same person. So there needs to be like one person, one vote. But as soon as that problem is solved, if that problem is ever solved, then it becomes possible to associate a particular rating of an article with different features like your nationality, your education level, what degree you got.
Larry, you're opening up a horrible can of worms with rating systems. Let's don't go there in this talk. Let's save that.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yeah, well,
I was thinking
I wanted to give you the whole vision, but no, we don't.
I mean, yeah, I dug at you about not having any particular rating system on the little prototype, but it's not really. I mean, that's just a horrible conundrum. I've spent a lot of time studying it.
It's down the road. We don't need to do it right away.
It's difficult.
There's other hard problems to solve before we get there.
Yeah, postpone.
Right.
I do have a epistemological question about all this.
Sure.
In terms of how you rate so when I looked at the search returns within your interface there, I know that the one I want to click on is the one that has the most number of data points in it that are most varied. That's actually the one I want to click on. So if it's an article about a school district, I want to know a lot of stuff. I want to know how many different schools there are in the school district, how many people are in the school board, what the ethnic composition is, what the relative rates of academic. I could go on for 10 minutes telling you all the different
school boards like to hide a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, right. But if you pull it from lots of sources, you can find it. So all other things being equal, if I put a school district in there, I just want to be told over in the a new column how many data points this encyclopedia article has. It might say 17. And if the next one down says 35, I'm just going to click on that one. So is that somewhat objective, right? How many different data points are available?
Yeah. And a lot of that stuff can certainly be just inferred from an examination, a machine examination of the article even. Which
is why Google elevates certain articles in search. They clearly are able to discriminate an article that covers all kinds of different factoids about the entity versus one that might be a long article, but only really talks about 3 different aspects of it.
But there are obviously other more subjective, difficult to infer matters like bias and who knows what else. So
we worked on this biodiversity project for quite a while. It's still posted. It's called Prota4U, and we had to rank every plant on 7 scales with stars, 1 to 10, 5. And of course, botanists can argue, no, that's better than this plant, perhaps for a given subject area. But we just made it statistical based on the distribution of that plant being mentioned in patents that had the word cosmetics. Okay, then there's a distribution, make it uniform, top 25 percentile or 20 percentile gets 5 stars, bottom gets 1 star, and you end up hacking together rating systems that saves a lot of time in terms of people talking, because we had this problem that it was just a circle about how to rate plants, and I just come up with at least an openly known method. We did frequency counts with the word cosmetics, hand cream, whatever, and the plant name, and got a distribution and then cut it into 5 stars, and that was it. So there's things one can do, but that's, I don't think, in the scope of Encyclosphere necessarily. It might be that within the encyclopedia articles, they'll say within this context, this article sucks. Within this context, it's a great article. And that's the dilemma. One article could be good for one thing, but terrible for another thing.
Right.
And that's a tricky thing, just to rate things.
Yeah, you know,
well,
a lot of those.
It's always, a rating is always with respect to a particular topic, and also for a particular audience too.
Right.
So, right. Well, we, I think, have talked about my questions quite well. I think the last thing that I would like to ask you all is, do you have any other advice for the Knowledge Standards Foundation for the whole project of creating an encyclosphere?
Yeah, carry on. I think it's really important. And part of it, Larry, part of the reason that I think it's important is that it will help flesh out certain intuitions about how humans grow to know things, right? Independently of just this project. So that's kind of fun, right? That's worth working on. And then the other thing I would say is, I know that you really don't want to launch the thing itself. You want to do the standards and all that and have somebody else host it. I do wonder if for a transitional period, you would need to host it until people get the picture and see what it is.
Yeah, maybe. Well,
Yeah, I think so. Having something working, even working, you know, very primitively, this thing your son wrote, that's a really good thing. Show that.
Yeah, I mean, and we are. It's just that.
But
yeah.
I'd really like to see the machine learning approach too. That's something beyond my technical capabilities, but that has such potential.
Sure.
And I think my advice would be being, as a business school professor, being customer centric, and you have many customers, a lot of different kinds of customers.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you do, just keep in mind, you have the encyclopedist crowd that you have to satisfy. You've got, and make their transaction costs as minimal as you can. You've got the users who are looking for things, make it easy for that. You've got the app developers who frankly don't want an app and white label it, and might want to put it as just a tab inside some other thing they're building. Who knows?
Yes.
So talk to some entrepreneurs about what they're thinking about how they would use this thing to monetize it, maybe, et cetera. I would say segment the market in terms of the customer space. And then hopefully there's a perfect equilibrium between all of that, where it's very efficient, very low cost, get something going. I kind of agree with Pat and Leslie on this, that minimally something, even after a 1 week rapid application development, something. So you define the problem space a little bit.
Can we publicize EncycloSearch right now? Do you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah. And also FactSeek, factseek.org. It's another of the same thing, another meta search engine. So, right. Well, I think we've come to a good stopping place, and I appreciate you folks coming on and giving me these ideas and feedback. And I hope introducing you to each other in this way is actually going to make some interesting things happen. So yeah, I mean, for you, Pat, I do hope that somebody out there is going to step up and help help you with.
Yeah, I need a developer. I need a media wiki developer.
Yeah, yeah. It's a worthy project, folks, and there's like a lot of people who could help. In fact, if you want, I can forward something to the mailing list. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, Leslie, I know you guys are really experts at plug and chug, but I'll bet Philip and his crew might even be able to teach you some things, and vice versa, possibly.
I had that thought when I was listening to his presentation. I thought maybe there is a lot of information out there about school board candidates and whatnot that's so scattered, and that we just
the thing that popped in my mind, I typed in where I went to high school, Fallon, Nevada once, and oddly enough, a little API that goes to these events things. You know that event APIs you can get that are on Facebook or on, you know, whatever. There's various sites that have events in your neighborhood kind of thing. So we had an API and it just came back and it says, oh, there's a quilting, oh, there's a school board meeting.
Yeah, great.
So you combine the the string school board or school, filter all your thing for just those keywords, and probably you might come up with an event thing as one of your 17 elements of the school district, right? Just one element is events, right? That kind of thing. Might be a simple hack, you know.
Interesting. Right. Okay. Well, again, I want to thank you all for showing up and you know, giving me all this really useful feedback. And if you're interested, I'm going to premiere this video tomorrow at noon Eastern. And if you want to like engage with people, last week we had a lot of very interesting chat actually as the thing was going on. And then I've got some questions similar to the questions that I asked you, but also a little bit different on encyclosphere.org in the seminar group. You can find it, just look for the forum in the menu of encyclosphere.org. And you'll be able to find the chat area for, or not the chat area, but the forum area for the seminar. And I've got 4 questions listed there. So if you all wanted to offer your own answers, that's fine. If you don't want to, that's also fine. Anyway, again, thank you very much. And so long for now then.
Cheers. Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Leslie.
Cheers. Bye.